Hello and welcome to Topic 6, Lecture 1. And in this lecture, we're going to do a quick overview of Congress. Okay, so Topic 6 is the start of Unit 2. And if you remember from earlier in the semester, this class is broken up into 3 units. And we just got done with the first unit, and that's the unit on foundations. Now we're starting the next unit, the unit on the institutions of government. And we are starting with the United States Congress. And so in this lecture, it's going to be a pretty quick lecture. We're just going to do a quick overview of Congress, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the differences between the House and the Senate. Now, this is the last topic that we cover before our midterm exam, and so you can read more about the midterm exam on the Canvas site, but there is also going to be a live study session for that as well next week. So keep your eyes open for that. And I just also wanted to note that even though topic 6 is topic 6, it doesn't correspond with chapter 6, okay? We do chapter 6 later on in this semester. And so topic 6 deals with chapter 12. That is the chapter on Congress. Okay, that's what we've got on the docket. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the federal legislature, the federal lawmaking branch, otherwise known as the United States Congress. Now, as you all know, Congress is composed of 2 chambers. It is a bicameral legislature. If it were unicameral, there would be 1 chamber. If it was tricameral, there would be 2. But this is bicameral, and we know why from earlier in the semester when we were talking about the compromises at the Constitutional Convention. And so the United States Congress is comprised of the U.S. House of Representatives and the United States Senate. It is established by Article 1 of the Constitution, and I really encourage you to take a look and read Article 1. In these next few weeks, we're going to be doing the federal legislature, Congress, the presidency, and then the federal judiciary, in particular the Supreme Court. And those are, established by Article 1, 2, and 3. So I think it's really important that as we're learning about each of these institutions, you actually go into the Constitution and read Article 1, because it'll really give you a sense of how it's organized, what its powers are, and what its membership qualifications are, etc. So please do that. And so Article 1 tells us about the design of Congress. It tells us about the election of its members, the process of lawmaking, and most importantly, the specific powers of Congress. Fuck me. All right, let's move on to take a look at the United States Senate. So as we know, the Senate is not based on population, that each state gets equal representation. And so each state gets 2 senators, there are 100 and there are 50 states. That means that we have 100 senators. Senators serve a much longer term. Their term is for 6 years. And again, this kind of goes back to that architecture of democracy, right? That you wanted to have staggered elections so that if there was some uprising, sentiment to, throw everybody out, it became, like more difficult to do that. you could maybe get rid of all the members of the House, but only 1/3 of the Senate. So it kind of puts the brakes on all sorts of abuses of power. And so the 6-year terms, the Senate is considered a more collegial chamber, or at least it used to be. Things are changing. It has more of a national focus and an international focus as well. And it's considered more prestigious, and it can oftentimes be seen as a stepping stone to running for either, for the presidency. Wisconsin has two senators. Our two senators are Senator Tammy Baldwin and Senator Ron Johnson. They are an interesting pair because, much like you would expect from Wisconsin, which is a purple state, half and half Democrats and Republicans, you see that represented in who we've elected for our senators. What's interesting about it, though, is that Tammy Baldwin is probably one of the most liberal Democrats within the United States Senate. And on the flip side of that, Ron Johnson is one of the most conservative Republicans that is in the Senate. And so while it's half and half, it's maybe not really purple because there's not a lot of overlap between Tammy Baldwin and Ron Johnson. So every 2 years, there is a federal election. The next federal election is on November 5th, 2024. That's the presidential election. During that time, we'll be electing both the President of the United States, all of the House of Representatives, and 1/3 of the Senate. And so there's two types of elections. We'll be learning about these later in the semester. One's called a presidential election, and the other is called the midterm election, two types of federal elections. The next midterm election is November 3rd, 2026. The midterm election takes place every 2 years, after the presidential election. So you'll have a presidential election. In 2 years, there will be a midterm election, and then in another 2 years, there'll be a presidential election, and so on and so forth. As I stated, all members of the House are up for election or re-election, and 1/3 of the Senate is up for re-election. And so since there is an election every 2 years, and that means that the makeup of Congress changes and can change quite significantly, that every 2 years, a new session of Congress begins, okay? And each session of Congress is numbered. The session is 2 years long. And so currently we are in the 118th U.S. Congress. I tell you that because for your simulated letter for Congress, you're going to be wanting to look at bills that are pending in the 118th Congress. And that according to federal law, members of Congress are sworn into Congress up to the new session on January 3rd, and depending on the year, so January 3rd, this year it was 2023 because the midterm was in 2022, and then they will serve until the next session of Congress takes over, and that would be January 3rd, 2025. All right, and so last but not least, here is the party makeup of Congress, okay? And so as we'll be learning during the course of this topic and in your textbook, and then throughout the rest of the semester, parties play a tremendously powerful role within Congress and beyond. And so we are a two-party system in the United States. Even though we have multiple parties, it's really only the Democrats and the Republicans who have, a potential for winning a seat. It's not impossible for an independent to win a seat, but as you can see there are very few independents. And so right now, the House of Representatives, the majority in the House are the Republicans. And so you can see that with the right there, Republicans. And the majority in the Senate are Democrats, okay? Now, you might be looking at that number and saying, wait a second, 48 to 50, that doesn't seem like a majority. That's because there are 3 independents within the Senate, and they all caucus with the Democrats. And so those 3 independents are Angus King from Maine, Bernie Sanders, as you might know from some, campaigns that he's run for office. He's from Vermont, and newly Kristen Sinema from Arizona, that she was a Democrat and she left the Democratic Party to be an independent. but all three of them caucus with the Democrats, thus giving them a majority. And now, if there was a tie, that tie would be broken by Vice President Harris. Okay. And so we've got split party control within the United States Congress. Republicans in the House, Democrats in the Senate, and then a Democrat in the White House. As I noted in this week's commentary, I think last week I sent out an announcement. The House is having a really hard time figuring out how its next speaker is. It's the majority that selects the speaker. The speaker was Speaker McCarthy. He was ousted, and now they're having a hard time finding another speaker. Maybe by the time you listen to this, a new speaker will be found. Steve Scalise dropped out because he didn't have enough votes. Jim Jordan's up next. We'll see whether or not he has enough votes. But as you'll be reading, why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because as you're reading in the textbook, you're going to see the party who has control of each chamber. That's very important because not only do you hold leadership positions, but also you get to make decisions about committees and how bills come to the floor and things like that. All right, that's it for this very short lecture. And so thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next lecture.